So we were talking about a very popular topic, distraction. So the distractions, particularly here in this mimer, are referred to as mayim rabim, the many waters. And the many waters, particularly the particular distraction, is referring to the what's called tirdos harpanasa. When someone gets distracted by the fact that they have to earn a living, they have to pay the bills. The truth is that there are many other distractions that we could put on this list. You could imagine that, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, earning a living was of a whole different category than what it is today. Baruch Hashem, I think there is, generally speaking, abundance today. You have to go you go to the store and you decide, do you want to buy the cottage cheese that's 2% fat or 4% fat or fat free? This is our worry of earning a living today, and it doesn't have anything to do with the price. We will pay more for less fat. That's a sign of abundance. Baruch Hashem. But in any case, we have plenty of other distractions that we can put on the list, and you would think that these distractions would drown out, would eliminate the love for Hashem. And so what the pasuk in Shir Hashirim is telling us is that lo yuchlu lechabes es ahava, that they cannot and they will not extinguish the love, the hidden love for Hashem that is hidden deep within our hearts. So it might not be a revealed love. It might not be a passionate love that we feel, but it's there. It's there inside, deep inside of the soul. It is innate. And it cannot be extinguished. Now, the Rebbe is now going to go into a question, which is, why would you think that it could extinguish the love? Why should it be able to? I mean, you're talking about love of Hashem, something that's godly, connected with God, our yearning for Hashem. It's a very high level. So why should these thoughts be able to extinguish the love? So the Rebbe is going to be bringing out here that they actually, all of these distractions come from a particular spiritual level. They come from a spiritual level that is called tohu. And we know in the creation of the world and bringing about of existence, tohu precedes tikkun. So let's take a look at the chart here. We've gone through this before, but we'll look at it again. This is let me make sure that we have all of our let me try to get all of the participants here. See what I have to push. Participants, okay. So we've gone through this chart before, but to make a long story short, originally, before anything came to existence, there was nothing. Well, that's not true. There was nothing but Hashem. There was just this divine light. There was this infinite God, and the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light. Hashem created a tzimtzum, which means that the light of the Ein Sof became incorporated within its source, within the Ein Sof itself. And in other words, a void in which we would not be perceiving the light. And in this void, God brought about a shall we say, a measured amount of Ein Sof that we call the Kav, as you see here on the screen. But on the way to bringing about this existence, there was a level called Shviras HaKelim, and this level is referred to as Tohu. So this level is called that's an H, sorry, a little bit hard here. Tohu. Tohu, of course, in the Chumash, we say that in the beginning there was Tohu and Vohu. So the Tohu was actually a level, the Arizal explains, was a level of Shviras HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, which meant that there was too much light for too little vessel. And there was the breaking of the vessels. And they shattered, so to speak. This is all an analogy. And the lowest level of these sparks, all of these sparks became scattered and they came trickling down. All of the levels of Tohu came trickling down throughout all of the subsequent world. And the subsequent world, its purpose, and ultimately our world of Asiya. So if you have an explosion, so the sparks and any light that was closest into the explosion ends up furthest away, right? It's a little counterintuitive. If you go to an explosion site, you will see items that are the furthest away from the explosion. Those are things that were once where? Closest in to the actual detonation, to the actual explosion. So they're pushed out, or the analogy that Chassidus gives. If something is, if a wall falls down, the bricks that were on the highest part of the wall end up furthest away from the wall. But I think the explosion now in our day and age, the explosive analogy, the analogy of the explosion works, excuse me, works better to understand that the sparks that are ending up in this physical world were once at the highest level of Tohu. And so basically, the whole realm of physicality, which includes everything we have to do with earning a living, and even the distracting thoughts of earning a living, those things are all they're sourced in a higher level of what we call Tohu, in the highest level of Tohu. And our entire work, this is all from the Kabbalistic philosophy of the Arizal, our whole work is to elevate these sparks. So when we have a distraction in our service of Hashem, it's a very deep philosophy, but there's a very profound takeaway from this philosophy. Because what that means is that the things that are trying to distract you, that's your work. That's your divine work. They're actually coming from a very high spiritual place. And what it means in essence is that there's really nothing outside of the scope of the divine. It's just a question of what kind of shape, what kind of form it's taking on. You'll find oftentimes with very abrasive people, very negative people, that if you can get past the defense mechanism, you'll find that there's something profound that they're trying to get through. They're trying to connect. The only way they know how to connect is through going like this, through butting head on. But if you remove your defense mechanism, what you're able to find is that there's a deep neshama here. There's a deep soul here. There's a very interesting story of the Baal Shem Tov. I don't know if it totally relates to this, but when the Baal Shem Tov first started the Chassidic movement, and then from a few generations onward, there was real resistance to the Chassidic movement. To such a degree, I mean, you had great rabbis who said that you have to go out against. You have to go out against the Chassidic movement and do whatever you can to stop these people. It's a bane on on Jewish tradition and on our values, and there was good reason for where they were coming from. The Baal Shem Tov was once in a city, and he was being welcomed by his followers, and then his detractors were throwing stones at him. Literally, they were throwing stones. What did the Baal Shem Tov do? He went and picked up these stones and he kissed them. He kissed the stones. His followers were saying, Rebbe, what are you doing? He said, this zeal and this passion for Yiddishkeit, these stones were thrown with absolutely for the sake of heaven. And they're holy. Could you imagine? The whole success of the Hasidic movement is that we remove our defense mechanism to go deeper. That's the point of the story. It's unimaginable, don't you think? I mean, applying that in real life. Unimaginable. I mean, that's crazy. The Baal Shem Tov saw deeper. He saw, boy, these stones are being thrown with a zeal and passion for the service of Hashem. He kissed them. They were thrown at him. They don't understand what this is about. They don't understand, right? Don't worry, their grandchildren will become Chassidim, which is what happened in many cases. So this is the idea of there is a tohu behind the tikkun. So, of course, the ultimate plan was for us to elevate and take the seeming negative and bring out the holiness behind it. But the seeming negative actually is sourced in a higher place than the positive. Speaking of which, we're going to take a fruit gel to elevate my blood sugar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakol miyabed barei.
Rebbe, if I may, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Ask a question. The shefa of the Ein Sof through the Kav is coming down and hits the Kalim, which, for whatever reason, and metaphorically and mystically, they can't hold them. So therefore, the Kalim break. What happens at that moment? Is the Kav still continuing down?
Yes.
So it's still proceeding through the broken Kalim. To
Yes.
where? To what?
To the next level, to the next stop, to the next world. If you take a look.
That was the word of Batzilus.
Take a look at the chart here. It continues down from the right. I mean, here it goes all the way down to Yetzira and Asiya, right? But let's take a look over here. So, Kabbalistically, this chart is not totally filled out. I don't know what happened. This first dot is called. All of these worlds. Let me annotate here. Maybe we'll be able to clarify this a little bit.
And finally, my last question: what is it that we are collecting? We say we're supposed to be collecting the sparks. What are these things that we're collecting?
All right, so that's the second question. So to answer your first question, You see there are 4 levels here, right? There's the yellow dot, there's the explosion, there's a crown, and there's the world of Atzilus. So these 4 levels, Kabbalistically, are called the worlds of the Ein Sof. And just like we have a world of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya that are spoken about at much greater length in Kabbalistic study, you have the, what's the right word? The primeval worlds, the primordial worlds, right? The worlds that came before the worlds. And in that, this yellow dot is called Adam Kadmon, but that's Atzilus of the primordial worlds. The breaking of the vessels, that's called Bria of the primordial worlds. And the Keser, the crown, that's called the Yetzira of the primordial worlds, of the Olamos Ha'ein Sof. And Atzilus is Malchut, is Asiya. Atzilus is called Asiya of the primordial worlds. So there is a primordial progression before our more, which is much more inchoate, much less formulated. You don't have the 10 spheros really until Atzilus, right? So what's going on? There's something on almost a pre-Hishtalshalus level. It's not really pre-Hishtalshalus, it's still Hishtalshalus. So that's to answer question number 1. And then these levels are spoken about. In fact, when you talk about the sheeps, some were spotted, some were striped, some were speckled. These are referring to these 3 levels, primordial levels of Adam Kadmod, the world of the Shvira, and Keser. So the sheep with which Yaakov was Akudim, Nikudim, and Verudim. These are mystical designations of different spiritual worlds that Yaakov was dealing with. We think of Yaakov as a shepherd. He was shepherding the mystical levels of the Ein Sof. That's what he was shepherding. That manifested in physical sheep. Getting back to answer your second question. So what are the idea of these sparks? These sparks are, what is a spark, a physical spark? And by the way, these are all of words that we use in Kabbalistic study are only an analogy, right? Even when we say the infinite light, it's not light. Light is an analogy that helps us understand it better, but we have to always remember that they're only analogies. So after that preface, a spark is an element of light that has seemingly broken off from its source. That's why we call it a spark, right? Now, a physical spark can only last for a second. But somehow or another, these sparks have become separated from their
source.
And
yet maintain themselves.
They retain an element of the divine, but they can ultimately manifest, let's say, in a pig down here in this physical world. How does a Jew? So in other words, the Or Ein Sof should come and become manifest in a pig? No, we can't. Kabbalistic understanding does not allow us to see it that way. And thus there was this level of Shviras HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, where these elements became disconnected from their source and fell lower and lower. What that's all about is another discussion, but ultimately it allows that these sparks can fall into everything and give them life. Ultimately, that's where the vitality of all of existence in this physical world exists. Truth to be told, it's in the negative and the things that are prohibited that contain the highest level of light. Paro, mystically speaking, came from a very elevated spiritual level, as the Zohar says. And that's why Moshe did not want to approach Bo el Paro. Come with me to Paro. God says, I will help you approach this high level. And the word Paro, Aramaic, in the Aramaic translation of the Zohar, it's a level from which it's all spirituality is uncovered. We know we do by the Mila, Pariya, which is the uncovering of the member. We remove the membrane, and now so that's a level of exposure, full exposure of the divine. That's the mystical level of Paro. Well, with our understanding of Tohu, right, we can understand this all a little bit better. We can also understand, by the way, and it's a good thing to mention, we can understand why people who had an immature they were brilliant minds that had an immature understanding of the Arizal, ended up formulating movements that were contrary to Judaism. The chief one being Shabtai Tzvi. So Shabtai Tzvi studied the Arizal, and he ended up with ideas that were antithetical to Yiddishkeit. That's why his followers continued to follow him even after he converted to Islam. What was their explanation? Well, it was a distortion of what we're talking about. Well, clearly the highest level of godliness is going to be found in Islam, the lowest level, the lowest religion. You see the departure from reality here. Of course, rule number one is you have to follow the Torah totally. You have to follow the code of Jewish law totally. And then two, when it appears to you that maybe you shouldn't follow the code of Jewish law, you know what you should do? Go back to rule number one, which is follow the code of Jewish law. So nothing is going to depart from following halacha. They unfortunately erred. And then there were people who went much further than him, like Jacob Frank in the 18th century. Craziness, just a craziness. I'm not going to go into all the details, but they based a lot of their things, a lot of their distortions were based on this principle that the highest light falls down to the lowest level. So the more that we debase ourselves, we can have access to this highest light. Well, that of course is a massive distortion, because you cannot debase yourself. Can you meet with a Jew who's far, far away? Yes, because you're attracting them to Yiddishkeit, but not the opposite. Reb David, please.
One of the brachas that he would say, Shabtai Tzvi, we say the bracha in the morning, Brachat Hashem Elkeinu Melech Haolam Matir Asurim, that Hashem releases the bound. So he changed it to Matir Isurim, that Hashem permits that which is forbidden.
Right. There you go. Interesting. Right? Because that's the, so you have to understand that any great idea, there's no idea that is not subject to distortion. Christianity, lahavdil, is a distortion of Yiddishkeit. Right? Again, a distortion in that case, maybe with a purpose, maybe with a plan, a divine plan, as Maimonides says in the Yad HaChazaka, very interestingly. But it's very interesting to see, once you understand this element, this idea of what the Kabbalah, what the Arizal teaches regarding Tohu, you can have a little sense of where that distortion occurred, right? And you can also start to understand why Jews were throwing stones at the Baal Shem Tov. Because this is what they were afraid of. The whole Shabtai Tzvi debacle happened just not even 100 years before the Baal Shem Tov publicized Chassidus. He publicized Chassidus in 1734. Shabtai Tzvi would have been in the mid 1600s, I believe, late 1600s. So the Jewish communities were devastated, and that's what created. So really, the whole rift between Chassidim and Misnagdim, one could explain as an aftershock of Shabtai Tzvi. Ha! It's all an aftershock of Shabtai Tzvi, an understandable aftershock. The whole idea that you can't learn Kabbalah, although the Talmud already tells us this. It's not, the Talmud already says that it had to be taught to only rare individuals and the like. But the Arizal worked on opening that up, on broadening that, as did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai a little bit. But the Arizal said mitzvah lefarsem zos hachachma. It's a mitzvah to publicize this wisdom. But then with Shabtai Tzvi, now we put a kibosh on it, right? Now we have to put it back into put it back into Pandora's box. But try to put everything back in. So when Chassidus came around, starting saying we have a new idea, the first thing that the Misnagdim called us, before they called us Chassidim, by the way, because the terminology Chassidim was from them, not from us. You got to love the sarcasm. It was a sarcastic moniker of this group, and it stuck because in the end it turned out, look who's more pious and careful in following these laws. Chassidim turned out to be following that more so. But the first thing they called us was the kat, meaning the cult. So anyway, it's just, it's interesting. I mean, once you understand the concept of tohu, right, that kind of opens up the whole area of discussion. You can have the Kabbalistic and Hasidic information can give you a much greater background of what this all of these divisions, all of these rifts and chasms in Judaism, what they're all about and what they're all based on. It can all go back to Tohu and Tikkun. Reb David, please.
Two things. One was another name that they gave us was they called the Chassidim the Freiler,
So
the happy ones.
Eventually, right? That was a better name that they called us in the later generations. Yeah,
right.
That
you were
was
saying
already complimentary.
Yeah, and then I was just reading over this past Shabbos. There's a story in Rabbi Zevin Sefer on the Parsha, and he says that there was a misnagid who he used to study Zohar, and he came to this one piece that he couldn't understand what it meant. So he went to the Chassidic Rebbe in the neighboring town, which was Reb Shlomo of Karlin, in order that he should explain this piece of Zohar. So Reb Shlomo of Karlin said, but you're a misnagid. I can't explain this to you until you curse the Vilna Gaon in my name.
By
So
the
he
way,
was
just a preface, Reb Shlomo of Karlin was different Hasidim, right? His colleague, the Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, would never take such an approach, and there were problems. We were not with the way of Karlin, but the Karliner we got to defend this, and we have to be proactive, and we have to go on the offense against these misnagdim, to fight them and to make fun of them and to deride them and etc., to humiliate them. Just to give you a little bit of background, so that was the Karliner way. I mean, holy man, the Karliner. Anyway, so he told the misnagid that I can't share this with you unless you.
I can't explain his words in the Zohar unless you curse the Vilna Gaon in my name exactly that I tell you. So this person was very upset and he left. Then he went back at home and he tried to figure out the Zohar by himself, but he was grappling and looking and looking and he couldn't figure it out. It was driving him crazy. Finally, he figured there's no choice. I'll just go back and I'll just say whatever words he tells me to say. My heart's not really in it.
I'm just going to say it.
Yeah. So he went back and Reb Shlomo of Karlin said to him, you should curse the Vilna Gaon in my name, that some of his descendants,
Right.
some of his descendants will become Chassidim. So he was relieved to hear that was the curse. And he said the curse. And afterwards, two of the grandchildren of the Vilna Gaon became Chassidim of the Tzemach Tzedek, Reb Menachem Mendel Lubavitch.
Very interesting. Is this in the English? This is in the English 7?
Yeah.
Which parsha?
It's on Parshas Lech Lecha this past week.
Okay, I'll have to look it up. Very interesting.
It says his words were fulfilled. Rabbi Eliyahu Tzvi of Beresov and Rabbi Zalman of Dishna, both prominent Hasidim of Menachem Mendel Lubavitch, were grandsons of the Vilna Gaon.
Wow. There you go. So, and the Vilna Gaon, of course, was very much pro-Kabbalah and pro-Zohar. For those that were, he wrote Perushim. There you could buy a sefer, the commentary of the Vilna Gaon on the Zohar. So he wasn't like he was anti-Zohar, anti-esoteric study. He was anti the way that it was being done, particularly with this with this group. Anyway.
Two of his followers, the Vilna Gaon's followers, who are known to be very honest, came to the Vilna Gaon and they told him that they saw the Alter Rebbe sitting on shul on Shabbos with a girl on his lap,
on Tisha B'Av.
On Tisha B'Av, eating and drinking in shul with a girl on his lap. So he figured these are very honest followers of mine, and I should believe them. Oh. And it was true because the girl was his granddaughter, and it was on Tisha B'Av. It was on Shabbos on Tisha B'Av. So when you're allowed to eat, he had his granddaughter in his lap, and this is how he was eating on Tisha B'Av.
Right. Another reminder that we always have to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. It's amazing how Hashem removes from our mind any possibility except for the first stupid idea that comes to our head. It's like when we want to judge someone, our first analysis of that is like we can't think that there's any other possibility.
And it's had the concept of Marcheshvan.
You're saying that the Alter Rebbe shouldn't have been eating and drinking publicly on Tisha B'Av because of Marcheshvan? I didn't hear you.
Saying is the concept of Marcheshvan is sort of related to the fact that we rush to judgment negatively. That was all of us.
I see what you're saying. That's Marcheshvan is because of the reality of the human condition.
Correct.
Well said. Okay. That's why I have to be careful because people always, right? This is I have 3 pictures in the refrigerator lesson that I learned from my brother, Alav Shalom. So my brother was living with me for a while, and he kept a pitcher of water in the refrigerator. Nothing unusual about that, right? But then eventually he was keeping 2 pitchers of water in the refrigerator. And then I think maybe even 3 pitchers of water in the refrigerator, and Baruch Hashem, we have refrigeration, but there's limited space in the world, especially refrigerator. It's, and it gets in the way. And so what possible explanation could there be for this? Unless he has a disorder, right? He must have some OCD going on. And in my mind, I'm developing a whole story, right? Eventually it's going to be 4 or 5. Who knows? The whole refrigerator is going to be filled up with pitchers of water, and we won't have room for anything. And I'm because there's no other possible explanation, is there? I mean, what possible explanation could there be why he needs to have so many pitchers of water? He doesn't drink that much water. He drank a lot of water, pitcher a day maybe. So finally, I asked him, and he said that, my kids come over and they'll take the water out of the fridge to take a glass, and then they'll leave it out on the counter. They don't put it back in. So I always like to have cold water. So this way, I make sure that I'll have cold water. I said, okay, a bissel sugar, but understandable. So I use that as my realization that when I come to a conclusion about somebody, that's just my very limited view of what's going on without knowing any information. So there we have it. So here's the $1 million question. Let's see who can answer it. So what does tohu have to do with mayim rabim, with the many waters? All of the distractions that come to our mind. What does tohu have to do with these great waters? Well, they're all about physical worries, financial worries. So they're all rooted in the world of tohu, which is a very high spiritual level. So one might think that they have the power to extinguish the love of Hashem. The love of the neshama is rooted in our neshama, and the neshama is rooted in the world of tikkun, which is a lower level on this whole chart that I shared with you. So you might think that the higher level is going to basically have the ability to totally get rid of the love. And that's why the pasuk comes along and says, Mayim rabim lo yuchlu lechabes es ha'ava. That the great waters, these crazy waters of all of the distractions of everything in life, cannot extinguish, cannot put out the love. So let's now see it inside. So when the soul descends to this world and is forced to deal with the pressures of earning parnasa, this enables the soul to reach a higher level of love for Hashem than it could have reached in the spiritual world. Wow. That's quite something. Parenthetically, the Rebbe points out that extinguishing the soul's love for Hashem would contradict the ultimate purpose of the creation of the great waters. So the ultimate purpose of the challenges involved with earning a parnasa is to bring the soul to a higher level, as explained above. Therefore, extinguishing, God forbid, the soul's love for Hashem would be completely against the purpose that Hashem created for them. This is why the great waters challenge to the Jew's ability to reveal his love for Hashem. They challenge it, but are ultimately unable to completely extinguish it. In other words, the whole purpose of this whole game is for us to overcome the negative and to realize the divine truth within. That's the whole purpose. There is no other purpose. Why is there so much negative in the world? Why are we so distracted? Or here, to put this in very real terms, what's the best way to strengthen your power of focus? Is it to find a very quiet place with absolutely no distractions to be able to sit down and learn? Or to go to a place where there are distractions, where there are things that are going to get in your way of your focus, and to learn to overcome them and deal with them, and to learn how to not let them distract you, right? That, of course, the second way, of course, is how you're going to develop your power of focus. If a person is used to sitting and studying in a quiet library with absolutely zero distractions, that's not true, of course, because you have your own brain. You bring your own head along, which has plenty of distractions in its own right. But aside from that, right? And then he goes home where he's got his wife and he's got the phone, he's got the computer, he's got the children, the grandchildren, whatever, right? He's never going to be able to study. Where is the soul going to be able to bring out its true strength? In this world where everything is challenging its love for Hashem. Everything except for the main thing. Your neshama is there. And so the more you learn to overcome all of the negative, right? All of the distractions, you're going to bring out a deeper love of Hashem. Whenever there's a distraction or something that is distracting, when I was a younger man, I used to get angry at distractions. When I mean a younger man, that was half an hour ago. Who here has ever become angry at a distraction? Right, we all, you're normal human beings. You become angry at the distraction, right? Like, usually, I mean, when it's involving a human being, right? But if you're forced to look deeper into your love of Hashem, now you go about life in a whole different way. So you have a guy running on a track, going around the track, and all of a sudden, there's this piece of wood on two legs in front of him on the track in his lane. And he says, "What? Who put this piece of trash here? Who put this obstruction here? Who put this piece of wood here? Someone could get hurt on this. I could trip on this." And he just stops and he turns around. But what he didn't realize is that he was meant to lift himself higher, to jump over the hurdle. As I've used this analogy many times, right? That this is, and if we start to look at every negative thing in life as a hurdle, it gives it a whole different connotation, a whole different meaning. All of these distractions are only there for us to bring out the deeper love of Hashem. Now, it's beautiful in the theory. Applying it, of course, is a whole other thing. So I would say that the way to apply a lot of these ideals is stop going with your first reaction. That's a good lesson in life in general. However you react to whatever the situation may be with your spouse, with your people in shul, or whoever it may be, and you have a first reaction, one thing you should know about this first reaction, it's probably chazer treif, as we say in Yiddish. It's as inappropriate as eating pig. That's your first reaction. This is the practical way to implement this idea. It's a very important life lesson, right? Whatever your first reaction is, your first thought, right? Know that that's not the truth. That's not the truth of the matter. That's just my reaction. Okay. All right, now what? Now that I can dial myself down, I can try to get to, 1 second, there's a certain truth, and this is a hurdle and something for me to overcome. Okay, then there's many different ways of dealing with it. But one of them is reaching deeper into your own neshama. and to your own divine truth. And when you do that, and you do that especially when dealing with other people, you'll open up a whole new way of doing it. Now, when you're, now sometimes, and the people aren't necessarily speaking up here, my usual detractors of, well, what about? Yeah, of course, there are situations, as a parent, for example. I don't know that any of us are bringing up young children, hopefully not. But there are points with a young child where there has to be a consequence. I'm not saying that there should never be a consequence. Or if somebody is speaking to me disrespectfully, right, as a rabbi, and someone's speaking to me disrespectfully, my first reaction is, boy, how could they possibly be so disrespectful to me? So what I endeavor to do is to not take it personally at all, right? The Baal Shem Tovs, people were throwing stones at him, right? Remember that story. Oh, so they're insulting me. Okay, that's, they're speaking disrespectfully to me. At a different time, I might say, by the way, when you spoke to me the other day, that was a bit disrespectful, speaking to the rabbi in that way. Not me, Yisrael Rice, but the rabbi, right? But it's no longer coming out of taking it personally and reactive and being defensive. I'm here as an educator. I do that with kids. Thankfully, I don't have such disrespectful kids today. Well, a little bit. But I will tell the kids, if need be, I'll take the child out of the classroom and I say, you know what? I'm sure you didn't mean to be, even though I think you probably did. But what you just said was disrespectful. So now I'm teaching him that this was disrespectful. And 10 times out of 10, you know what the child will say? Sorry. And that's it, without taking it personally. So it doesn't mean that you become a doormat, but you're able to stand up for yourself without becoming defensive. Whole different way in life. David, please.
I forget the details, but there was a Chassidic Rebbe, there was a Chassidic story that somebody gave him a certain sum of money, and he needed this same sum of money to free a person that was a captive, that was in a dungeon with his family. And his immediate thought was to use the sum of money to free this family that was captive. Then his second thought was, well, that's not good because there's a lot of people that are having problems, and I'll take this sum of money and I'll split it amongst all the people so that all these people that are having difficulties should find relief. And then he realized that the first thought was the proper thought.
Yeah. So it wasn't a negative reactive thought. So let me qualify that, right? So when you have a thought for doing something good, that first thought that comes to your mind for doing something good, yes, act on that. Thank you for that modification, right? So what I'm talking about is your first negative reactive thought. But if you have a positive reactive thought, right, then possibly and probably that's what you should do. Even then, not always. But that's when we get into the issue of second guessing yourself, right? So once you start second guessing, that's not so good, right? But when we're talking about changing our way of viewing the situation, you should always second guess your first negative reactive thought of judgment, of becoming upset at people, of becoming defensive. So in negative areas. Okay, let's do a little bit more on the mimer.
Rabbi.
Yes.
That's like the guy who says dishonesty is the second best policy. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, it's a comment.
Honesty is the best. Honesty is the best policy. Dishonesty is the second best policy.
Okay, funny. But no one should take that face value, right? That's not meant to be taken literally. It's a joke. All right. So now the Rebbe explains how the challenges of earning parnasa can bring the soul to a higher level. When a Jew is faced with the challenges of earning a parnasa, the overwhelming preoccupation with making a living can consume him completely. This takes him away from his ultimate purpose in creation and invests his mind and heart in the wrong areas. However, when a Jew realizes the mistake that he has made, this awakens within him a tremendous feeling of bitter remorse and motivates him to do teshuvah, to return to Hashem. As we will soon explain, this opportunity to do teshuvah is why the soul descended to the world. Boy, that's again. In order to do teshuvah, that's why the soul descended into the world, which means you're going to have to encounter a lot of negativity and maybe make some poor decisions. The Rebbe will discuss teshuvah on our level, teshuvah on a higher level. But in any case, if we came down here in order to do teshuvah, that would suggest that we came down here to make mistakes. But we'll get back to that a little later. So before a soul comes down into this world, it is considered a complete tzaddik who doesn't face any challenges in the service of Hashem. In other words, we think of our soul, okay, we have a soul in our body. When we pass away, the soul will continue to Olam Haba, to the world of truth. It may have to go through some other stages, whatever that may be. But seldom do we think about the fact that our neshama existed before we were born. Person once asked the rabbi, do you believe in life after death? The rabbi said, you should ask me if I believe in life after birth. Right? Life after birth, that's a life riddled with many problems, difficulties, and disconnected from the true life. But before the person was born, the soul was perfectly connected with Hashem on many different levels. In fact, we say in the prayer in the morning, we say, Elokai, my God, neshama, the soul, shenatata bi, that you put within me, tahorahi, it is pure. Ata barata, you created it. Meaning that there's a level of the neshama before it was even created. And that's called tahorahi. The highest level of the purity of the neshama you cannot, when something is created, what does that mean? That when God creates something, what does created mean? It now emerges from being totally incorporated within God to being its own, having its own self-identity. So before something is created, what is it? If it exists, but it doesn't have a self-identity, that's the level of the neshama, the way it is perfectly incorporated within Hashem. So before a soul comes down into the world, it's considered a complete tzaddik who doesn't face any challenges in the service of Hashem. One could question whether there is any service of Hashem. Let's see what it says here in the original. Oh, where are we?
But we're never fully separated from Hashem. We're connected to Hashem, even though to us we feel we're an independent entity.
Right, right. But we also can make decisions that are contrary to God's will and bring ourselves to mind spaces which are contrary to God's will. That's why it's either a sin or it's sinful. So by descending into the world, it can face and overcome challenges to become a Baal Teshuvah, who stands at a level where a complete tzaddik is unable to stand. Right? This explains why the soul can only achieve the level of Baal Teshuvah after descending into this world. Wow. Well, this is a famous teaching in the Gemara that a place where a Baal Teshuvah stands, even a complete tzaddik cannot stand there. Now, the Rebbe applies this to the cosmos and to the soul existence. That before we were brought into the world, we were a tzaddik. What could be better than being a tzaddik? Answer: being a Baal Teshuvah. And that's why we came down into this world. And being a Baal Teshuvah means that we have to be assailed with all of this negativity, all of these mayim rabim, these the troubled waters that include all of the troubling thoughts and all of the things and the worries about earning a parnasa and our lack of bitachon, our lack of having absolute trust in Hashem. Right? If a person has absolute trust in Hashem, is he going to worry about parnasa? No. He has to do parnasa, and as we learned last week, he has to make a vessel to receive the blessing of God. He's not going to worry about it. So it means a person has come to a level where he's not as connected to Hashem as he would be before he was created. And now he can become a Baal Teshuvah. All right, we'll get back to this, God willing, next week. I think we're on next week. Yeah, we should be. Oh, Reb David, please.
I think part of the confusion might be that when a person looks at the reality of the world and he sees, for instance, that such and such a person from such and such a family is looking to get married, and they go to get married, they want to marry other well-known family members who are known as tzaddikim. They're not running to marry Baal Teshuvahs.
That's a mistake. That has to do with people's lack of trust in Hashem. In the olden days, 50, 60 years ago, it's much more common. That you had women from totally Chassidic stock marrying Baal Teshuvahs. You have, I mean, I can mention them. It doesn't, it's not. But I'm trying to think if there's any famous ones. But yeah. So when someone says they come from a line of a rabbinic family of rabbi after rabbi and tzaddikim, so you say, what? You mean there's not one Baal Teshuvah in that whole holy line? There's not one guy that did Teshuvah. There's a famous chassid. I don't know what precipitated the story there, but he came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him something about something or other, and he said, "The Rebbe, I'm not a Baal Teshuvah." And the Rebbe said, "Why not?" But this whole notion of a Baal Teshuvah being less than is anathema to the thinking, writing, and actions of the Rebbe. So a lot of things that followers do are not following. Nothing new there, right? All right. Thank you all for joining. And God willing, we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.